I wanted to start today with your expertise, which is Biden is pushing to have a ghost gun ban, and it doesn't appear that he needs congressional approval to do so, at least according to him. Could you give us a little rundown on what he's attempting to do and why this is so blatantly unconstitutional? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I believe it's
right. Yeah. You're not putting words in my mouth, and if you did, they'd be words with which I agree. Okay. It is blatantly unconstitutional. It's the same stunt that his former boss, President Obama, tried to do with respect to certain immigration regulations. He proposed them as legislation. Congress turned them down. He signed 24 executive orders purporting to make them law anyway. The Supreme Court took years to get to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court invalidated them. Old Joe is trying to do the same thing. The Democrats in the House passed legislation banning ghost guns. We'll define, there's many definitions, but we'll define ghost guns as guns that don't have a serial number. For the most part, they are made at home using kits. They're not against the law federally. They're against the law in a couple of states, including where I happen to be now, New Jersey, but most states have not regulated them. The president seems to think that he has the authority through the Bureau of Tobacco, Alcohol, and Firearms to change federal law, A, to make these guns illegal, B, to force any gun dealer who comes into possession of these guns to affix a government-issued serial number to them. Now, this is unconstitutional for a couple of reasons. One, we have the separation of powers in the United States of America. Congress writes the laws. The president enforces the laws, whether he agrees with them or not. The courts interpret the laws. Congress, the president can't write his own laws, and we know that. That's what he's attempting to do because the Senate won't even consider this piece of legislation. Second reason it's unconstitutional is we're not talking about regulating the amount of sugar and soda pop. We're talking about a fundamental personal liberty that the Supreme Court in 2008 and again in 2012 has defined as the natural extension of the ancient right to self-defense. Somebody attacked your property, your spouse, your children. You have the absolute right in ancient times to use the same instruments against them that they use against you. Fast forward to the modern era, the late, great Justice Antonin Scalia wrote for the Supreme Court in 2008 that the right to keep and bear arms is the right to keep and carry weapons of the same level of sophistication as the bad guys have and, ready for this, as the government has. So Joe is dead wrong when he says the Second Amendment is not absolute and we can decide what weapons you own. I remember chiding Mrs. Clinton once in the 2016 campaign, ripping apart AR-15s. I was at Fox at the time. And then we put an ex-Secret Service agent on screen to say, what did you carry when you were protecting her? AR-15s. So these weapons are good enough for the elite to hire federal agents to protect them, elite in the government, but not good enough for us to have. The practical reason why old Joe is so wrong, Clint, and everybody knows this, a 10-year-old child knows this practical reason, is a person who is willing to murder innocents, the same person who's going to be punctual about obeying gun laws. Of course not. So the thing won't work. We just had a terrible tragedy here on the East Coast. A madman shot 16 people in a subway car, and he set off a smoke bomb. So people were terrified. They couldn't see, they couldn't breathe, and somebody was shooting at them. There wasn't a gun in that car except for his. If there had been an off-duty cop there, or if we truly had the right to keep and bear arms, he got off 54 shots. He wouldn't have got to his third shot. He would have been put away. And that's the only way to stop these people. They won't obey these laws about what's licensed and what's not licensed. Second thing old Joe wants, besides banning these ghost guns, Clint, he wants a national federal registry, which of course does not exist now. the states have a registry. Let me tell you why. This will scandalize some people listening, and it will bring great joy to many others. Let me tell you why I'm in favor of ghost guns. Because the first thing a tyrant does when he takes over the country is to confiscate the weapons of the people. And how does he know who has the weapons? Because they've registered them with the government.
I mean, it seems so obvious, right? Like they can't.
It's like I said, your 10-year-old niece or nephew or child could understand this.
Well, and I think that's unfortunately kind of their intent, is that if they have the registration, then they know where all the guns are, at least all the law-abiding guns, and then they can, try and seize them. I think that would amount to a civil war, and I don't know that they would ever take it to that level, but it certainly is that's the fundamental prerequisite for any sort of seizure campaign. Is that
so?
Fair to say?
In the very same moment that people in the Ukraine are using guns that they had in their basement to protect their homeland, Joe is saying, "What do we need guns for?" The Second Amendment does not protect the right to shoot deer. It protects the right to shoot tyrants if they take over the government or they're trying to take over the government.
That's right. That's right. And it gets even more absurd, Judge Neff, in that we just sent 50 million rounds of ammunition to the Ukrainians, and he is trying to ban extended magazines in America. It's like they are robbing us to fund the arming of people that are fighting for their own freedom by the U.S. government's narrative, and yet we're going to arm them while we are disarmed actively. How are the American people to accept this, the absurdity of it on its face, and just be like, yeah, this makes sense?
And this is being done by executive fiat rather than legislation, just like all the lockdowns, Clint. Yep. We just ended 2 of the most totalitarian years, the exception perhaps of Reconstruction after the Civil War, war between the states, in American history. None of it came from the Congress. None of it came from a state legislature. None of it even came from a city council. It all came from 2 presidents, mainly Joe, but Trump fell for some of this stuff as well. And it came from many governors and from many mayors. They just made up a law and punished people who disobeyed the law. And it wasn't a law, because only the definition of a law in the free society is something enacted by a legislature that's written down that regulates behavior that causes harm. Mm-hmm. It's not the whim of the governor or the mayor or the president at the moment.
Well, they justified it under the pretense of, declaration of emergency, giving them special powers. It seems to me that an eternal emergency, you can't have that, because then if you have a governor that just says, well, it's an emergency, so I have to do all of this unconstitutional stuff, but then the emergency is endless, well, then you don't have a constitution, right?
So Lincoln claimed emergency during the Civil War and said that gave him the right to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. The writ of habeas corpus is the right of somebody arrested, whether it's for January 6th or whether it's for shooting up a subway car, whether it's for fanciful crimes or for real crimes. The right of a person arrested to require the arresting official to justify the arrest before a neutral judge. Lincoln claimed he had emergency powers during the war between the states when half the country was trying to kill the other half. Supreme Court said there are no, Supreme Court that he had appointed, there are no emergency exceptions to the Constitution.
Incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, wow.